Welcome back to Mike's Monthly Mix. Yeah, this is about right. I live life on the edge by talking about Taylor Swift on the internet, so it was only a matter of time before I got by the biggest Swiftie of them all. Satan. Well, I should probably make my final remarks before I'm cast to an eternity of darkness and mild neck pain. It's a good thing I always carry with me a transcript of my last words. Thankfully, I'm very efficient too, so my last words are my thoughts on the new James Blake record.
I've been normal.
I can imagine that an early James Blake fan might be disappointed in his work now. The man who's 3 letters away from being James Blunt started the 2010s as a breakthrough post-dubstep act, able to marry claustrophobic electro soul with the kind of falsetto that makes you float like a Disney character. But in the years since his debut record, he slowly shifted away from abstract electronics and more towards conventional singer-songwriter fare. Now that's not a slight against the records that would follow. My feelings towards them range from strongly approve to passionately tolerate. But it's with this new record of his, Friends That Break Your Heart, that completes his metamorphosis into a proper singer-songwriter. In hindsight, his signature cover of A Case of You wasn't a break from tradition, it was a threat. Honestly, this new record has more in common with that cover than the rest of his discography. The lyrics this time could be interpreted as breakup songs, but as the title implies, it's not so much a romantic breakup as it is a platonic breakup. It always hurts when you have no homies to kiss goodnight. And even though the stakes might seem lower as a result, James gets to whip out his orchestration skills, plus he still croons with that same trademark tenderness. In a weird way, this might be the most personal record James has put out since that debut record, except instead of garbled vocal effects, you get Phineas O'Connell peeing on his leg. Overall, I enjoyed this one. I think if you're a James Blake fan, you'll enjoy this one too, and if it sounds up your alley, check out Show Me with Monica Martin. Speaking of Phineas O'Connell, Phineas put out his debut studio record. Now I know we all know him best as Alistair from Glee, but here he shows his bona fides as a proper songwriter. If anything, it's a technical success, but lyrically you can feel pretty hollow. I'd love to see him do more production work though, maybe with, I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. Billie Eilish, for example, I think they'd work well together. You ever hear of these guys called the Beatles? Their final album, Let It Be, came out over 50 years ago, and we just got a remixed deluxe version, which shows they didn't pay attention to that album title. Even with a new stereo mix and a cornucopia of outtakes, it's still the same controversial rapscallion that closed out the band's legendary tenure. If you weren't a fan before, you won't be a fan now. If you were, it's a nice excuse to revisit. The only real downside about this release is the realization that Revolver likely won't get the same treatment. We'll just have to wait for the 100-year anniversary for that. Bad Bad Not Good continue to defy their own namesake with another solid release. I think at this point BBNG have so thoroughly excavated their own sonic niche that everything they put out will be some level of good, even if none of it's gonna blow your mind. So yeah, I wouldn't threaten to sell my own gallbladder if you didn't listen to it, but I still think it's a fine release. Check out Talk Meaning with Terrace Martin. Coldplay's back with the most go-for-broke pop crossover album they've made since 2015. You got Max Martin, you got BTS, you got Selena Gomez, you got Emojis. Now I'll be honest, I'm a Coldplay apologist. I'm the guy who thinks Ghost Stories is one of their best albums. Don't worry, that feeling of betrayal will pass in time. That said, if you don't like this album, I do not blame you in the slightest. Coldplay walk a precarious rope with their songs. It's precarious because they hit it with sledgehammers. They go for such sweeping, saccharine emotion that, when gone astray, makes one feel like a captive in a Hallmark movie, and this new record might be the hallmark of that feeling. The songwriting and hooks are fine, and there are still moments where Coldplay are stretching their muscles, like on the closer Coloratura, but still, this one is only for the most die-hard pop Coldplay fans. Like me, I guess. UK producer and TikTok sensation Pink Pantheress dropped a new mixtape, To Hell With It. If you are not already on the Pink Pantheress locomotive, then this makes for an excellent introduction to her breakbeat pop stylings. Plus, the whole thing is only 18 minutes long. My favorite track was I Must Apologize, though it's a bummer that Just a Waste isn't on here, maybe because of that Michael Jackson sample. The world is a beautiful place, and I am no longer afraid to die. On an unrelated note, this album, Illusory Walls, is a banger. There's a unique catharsis that this post-rock band has always been able to capture, but man do they hone in on it for this record. Some of their best hooks, some of their best playing on a technical level, and 2 15-plus minute tracks that make for a stunning closer. That said, if you want to dip your toes in, give Queen Sophie for President a listen. Magdalena Bay was introduced to me as one of those TikTok bands that seem to follow a 2-step process to success, so going into their debut record, I really didn't have high expectations. Anyway, this is one of the best pop records of the year. It's restless, it's infectious, it's offbeat when it wants to be, and it's earwormy as hell. I cannot wait to see them get bigger. Check out Secrets Your Fire for a taste. Don Toliver dropped his second album, Life of a Don, and if this is a sonic representation of his life, it's kinda shallow, but Don's voice is good enough to carry it. I thought Don's vocal on Donda was one of the best things about that record, so learning he had a new album coming out soon after Donda was reason enough for me to keep paying my bills. And his voice is great on this, even if the production would get him a solid B+ from the Travis Scott Academy. I did really like Drugs and Hella Melodies with Kali Uchis though. Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga released a second album of classic ballads. To me, I can't really hate on a collaboration like this. It's too wholesome. I Get a Kick Out of You. Hayden Thorpe has a new solo album out. You might know him as the former lead singer of Wild Beasts, and his first piano-led album from 2019 did a good job setting him apart from those two words. This new one goes a bit more towards synth pop, so while it's not as striking as the last record was, it's still a competent and occasionally gorgeous record. My favorite track being No Such Thing. Let me put you in my shoes for a moment. I'm hopping into bed after thoroughly researching the DK Rap All I Want for Christmas Is You mashup. I pull up the TikTok and I see this girl. She's surrounded by Technicolor and CRT haze, and she's singing about Chuck E. Cheese of all places. Now, I was always a Jeepers kid myself, but I gotta pay my respects to Chuck Entertainment Cheese for his incredible work. And out of respect for his work, I check out this artist's debut album. The artist is Remy Wolf, the album is Juno, the flavor is immaculate, and the pizza is aggressive. We talk a lot about the 2000s and its possible resurgence in 2020's pop music. Juno comes across as an intense study of that era of pop. Any given song might remind you of Ludacris, JoJo, or even Michelle Branch. And in its most jovial sounding moments, like the stellar Quiet on Set, this thing is the soundtrack to the best 2000s party you could ever throw. But like any good party, it's not just about the positive vibe, it's also about what's lurking behind every corner. People don't come to my parties often. I won't go into detail, but Remy's spoken about her own personal troubles leading up to this record, and they help underscore its most emotive moments. The second half of Volcano, in particular, is really bittersweet to me. Remy's one to keep an eye on. Give Quiet on Set a listen to support my boy Chuck. Young Thug is back with an album called Punk, and as you might expect from that title, it's a bunch of gooey love songs. Nothing sticks it to the man quite like being in touch with your emotional self. At this point, Young Thug is so charismatic that hearing him do anything is on some level interesting. I don't know if I'm gonna come back to this album specifically, but I'm glad this album's out in the world. It makes me feel more confident. It makes me feel like, yeah, I do deserve to wear shoes today. Sarah Tudson furthered the Illuminati Hotties cult agenda with this new album. Her last album was one of the best contract loopholes in recent memory, but this new full-length is able to take that record's energy and pair it with welcome bits of intimacy, and it's still really funny. Check out Muyaya. Sorry if I mispronounced that. British songwriter Terza dropped her second album, Color Grade. I don't get it. I really don't get it. It's not even that it's bad, I just don't understand it. I know I'm in the minority with that. Everyone else I've seen loves this thing. Check out Sink In, maybe you'll like it more than I did. Brandi Carlile has a new album out following her highly successful sixth album, and of course it's good. Brandi has over 15 years of yeehaw experience under her yeehaw belt and a powerhouse voice to back it up. Of course this album's good. I would never lie to you about these things. Other things maybe, but not this. I loved Broken Horses. Rapper and Twitter savant Zach Fox put out his debut record. I think Zach's a super funny guy and a talented musician, and I also think that I'm going to enjoy future records of his more than this one. But still, it can be damn funny, especially a certain line about sandwiches that I won't spoil. After an EP earlier this year, JPEG Mafia just released LP. Where? Peggy is the gift that keeps on giving, and this new record of his is another excellent display of experimental hip-hop. One second you'll feel enveloped in layered synth hooks, the next a wrestler will be describing a brutal carjacking. No matter what, it's a wild, unpredictable ride. Give Bald a listen. Quarantine albums are the hot new thing. It makes you wonder just what happened in the past 2 years. I'm just learning about the Berlin Wall. Elton John's is the latest to drop with the Lockdown Sessions, featuring collabs with a bunch of artists. I always think it's nice to see older artists pairing up with and learning from the new kids on the block. Granted, I'm not crazy about what they come up with on this, but it's still nice to have it out in the world. Check out the one track with Dua Lipa that interpolates Rocket Man for basically no reason. Parquet Courts are back with this new joint called Sympathy for Life. Now, their last record surprised me with how groovy it could get on occasion. This new one feels like them just cranking the groove dial up and up until it breaks off. I was not expecting the pivot, but I gotta say, it suits them well. Some people might miss the more abrasive rock of their first few records. I personally love to see them become our generation's talking heads, especially on Application Apparatus. My Morning Jacket released their 9th record. This one is kind of a case of market saturation. MMJ are firmly in that retro dad rock lane, and I already have bands that satisfy that need for me. Spoon. That said, if you're a fan of their past work, you will probably love this. I've had In Color on repeat. And full disclosure, the new War on Drugs album is really hot off the presses. I didn't want to fully cover it here. I wanted to give it more time, but I've also been dying for this record to come out, so I figured I would meet in the middle and show you my first reactions after listening.
There's a picture on the wall of me on a John Deere.
The Lana Del Rey timeline can be split into two periods, Binifer and Anifer. Lana had been making good stuff in her early years, but 2019's Norman effing Rockwell blew all of that out of the sparkling California water. The detail presented, both musically and lyrically, created this stunning picture of romantic dystopia, which should probably be the title of her biography one day. So you might ask yourself, what do you do after making NFR? Well, you make this record in early 2021, a fine understated change of palette, and that same year you make another record, Blue Bannisters. The LDR pipeline is the greatest threat to America's youth. Now let me be upfront, I don't like Blue Bannisters as much as NFR. It carries over some of Chemtrail's slower pace, and combined with the hour-plus runtime, the pacing suffers for it, but I like the groundwork it sets up for future records. The more personal, lyrical touches are great. I'm not going to try to surmise if said touches are factual, given that the D in Lana Del Rey stands for persona, but it adds back in a humanity that Chemtrails was, to me, lacking. Also, there's a particular stanza in Sweet Carolina. I won't spoil it, but it is the hardest I've laughed at Lana's lyrics since NFR. It's also sonically more adventurous than her past records. At first, I welcomed Lana and Jack Antonoff adding new flourishes like big bands and even a flamenco trap outro, but then my world was shattered when I learned Jack Antonoff isn't on this one in any capacity, so he was the one keeping the flamenco trap at bay. Overall, it's a good listen, and I think between this and her album from earlier this year, I can safely say that I am Team Bannisters and not Team Chemtrails. Which is good because I could not handle the PR troubles. Well, that about wraps up most of the big releases in October. I suppose I'll now be forced to live out for the rest of eternity my greatest nightmare: making videos on YouTube.com.